Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We were apprehensive about the weather. And so even though we scheduled this at 6 p.m., which is a deviation from our normal 7 p.m. start time, we were planning to have it across the street in the park. That seemed like a appropriate venue for talking about nature, the environment, greenery, and our beautiful city. Nature has given us an absolutely gorgeous 6 p.m., but as of this morning, we were afraid it might be raining cats and dogs. So that's why we're indoors. Apologize for that, and I hope we haven't lost anyone wandering around Jefferson Park looking for our little festival. I hope you had a chance to stop by some of the tables outside, and I see a number of people sampling the food. Uh, Courtesy I Declare, which is a wonderful, relatively new business in Old Pasadena on Green Street, the corner, I think, of Pasadena Avenue and Green. A wonderful chef from France who has pioneered a really extraordinarily high quality French bakery using only plant-based ingredients. That's not easy for a Frenchman to give up on butter. But obviously, he has pioneered the ability to meet or even exceed the taste levels that you get when you use the traditional ingredients. So my name is Rick Cole. I have the privilege of representing this city council district, which basically runs from Colorado up to Woodbury, most of Lake Avenue north of Colorado. I share that with council member and now vice mayor Jess Rivas. And then I go a little past Allen, sometimes to Craig, sometimes to others. There's a kind of a jagged border on the east end, but it's basically north central Pasadena. How many people live in District 2 tonight? All right, well, terrific, about half. And welcome to those of you interested in this topic. I hope you'll return. We have these meetings once a month, not only in person, but also on Zoom to be accessible. And I'm sure we have some people listening in on Zoom today. And we also, this is recorded. And so if you want to share it with your friends in a day or two, it'll be up on our city website under the District 2 part of that. The purpose of these issue forums is threefold. The first is to inform, to expose you to some terrific experts and thought leaders, to give you some food for thought, as well as the food we've got today. The second is to engage you, to so that not only are you informed, but you feel like this is something you can get directly involved in, that you can raise your voice, that you can join with others in organizations, that you can express your opinion to your neighbors and to the city council. And then finally, that we can actually take action, that there will be tangible results of us working together. Democracy is not just the ability to express your opinion. Democracy is for us to come together for sensible, realistic, positive solutions to some of our most pressing problems. And that begins right here at the local level. So tonight we're going to talk, this is Earth Month. Has been since I was a high school junior and participated in planting a tree at San Clemente High School. I had a brief sojourn. My parents lost their house in one of Nixon's recessions. And so we moved to the beach, and I spent 3 months at San Clemente High School, absolutely miserable. Came back to Pasadena, graduated from Blair High School. But I celebrated Earth Day in 1970 in San Clemente. 56 years ago, the first Earth Day. We've come a long way in many ways. Our air is so much less polluted than when I was a child. So there are definitely things we can point to. Our rivers and oceans have cleaned up. You remember when some of you either have less hair like me or gray hair. The river in Cleveland caught on fire, right? That doesn't happen anymore. The Cuyahoga River. Randy Newman wrote a song, Burn On, Big River, Burn On. The Lord can make you tumble. The Lord can make you turn. The Lord can make you overflow, but the Lord can't make you burn. That was man-made. So we've made some real progress, and Pasadena has been a leader in environmental consciousness and environmental action. We were one of the first in the state to ban single-use plastic bags at the grocery store. We are now embarked, as you'll hear, on some very ambitious environmental goals. But as I said to LP, who I'll introduce in a moment, this afternoon when we were chatting, we're probably ahead of 97% of the cities in California. But to be in the top 3%, is small comfort when the planet is on fire. And so we have an ongoing responsibility to our children and our grandchildren and the world around us to be leaders. I believe strongly in to those who much is given, much is asked. Much has been given to us in Pasadena. This is a wonderful place to live, not without its problems, not without dark periods in its history, but this is a wonderful place to live, and we're all lucky to be here, especially given all the trouble spots around the world where one can't even go out their front door without worrying about war and poverty and disease. So let me introduce our panel tonight, and then we'll get into a discussion. Here's the format. We'll talk for about 45 minutes to an hour as a panel. If you want to participate in that phase, you can, my district liaison, Meheti Derbagosian, who's in the back. Let's give her a round of applause because there is nothing I do that she has not enabled, including tonight. She will pass out little index cards. Write your questions or comments, and I'll try to feed them into that part of the discussion. Then we're going to save some time at the end for you to express your thoughts or ask questions of me and the panel. The only qualification there is you don't have to ask a question. You can make a statement. All I ask is that whether it's a question or a statement, it be brief. And I will not let go of the microphone because there's always someone who wants to tell us for 10 minutes their opinion, and that's okay, but not in this format. So there's opportunities after we're done for all of that. So does everyone understand the format? Let me introduce our panel. I had invited my colleague, Justin Jones, who heads the Municipal Services Committee, who's a very strong environmentalist, one of the strong environmental voices on our council. He is running for re-election, so we couldn't publicize his participation. So Justin will participate in a issue forum soon. I expect he'll be reelected. And so I look forward to that. I've endorsed him. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to make that political statement, but I just did. All right, so our panel, beginning with Lindsay Page McCloy, who goes by LP, brings a great record. She worked in New York on their climate plan in the office of the mayor, was the environmental coordinator for the city of Palm Springs, and has recently joined our staff as our leading environmental expert and professional. And then we have the person who has built the most effective grassroots advocacy organization in the last 5 years in Pasadena, which is Pasadena 100. Pasadena 100, genuine grassroots organization that's had a profound impact on the direction of our city. They did it the right way, which is they went out into the community and gathered support. And that support enabled them to persuade first the school board, then the community college board, and finally the city council to endorse going to 100% renewable energy by 2030. So Cynthia Kennedy is an attorney. She is a remarkable leader, but remarkable in part because of her humility. She will never take personal credit, always gives credit to the people in Pasadena 100, and it has been extraordinarily effective. Literally the weekend before the city council unanimously adopted the goal of getting to 100% renewable energy by 2030, which is the most ambitious renewable energy goal in the state. There were not a majority of votes for that measure, but the incredible organizing power of grassroots advocates caused people to figure, this train is leaving the station, I better get on board. And so they all did, and now we're working to achieve that goal, which is a challenge, and we'll talk about those challenges. And then finally, Anna Soul River is in the real estate world as a commercial broker with a long-time passion for adaptive reuse. It's the most environmentally sustainable building is one that already is built. You can tear this down and build a platinum LEED certified building, but what you've done is remove all of the embodied carbon that went into building this building 100 years ago, and it'll take decades, if not longer, to make up the deficit. So she's been an extraordinary advocate for that. Also very active in Pasadena Heritage, which is a wonderful organization in our community, and the District 2 appointee to the Environmental Advisory Commission. The mayor's appointee to the Environmental Advisory Commission, who lives in District 2, is Suzanne York. So we have two of our environmental commissioners here tonight. So with that, I'm going to get started with our panel. So Cynthia, let's start with you. It was pretty lonesome when you started this effort. How did you gain the ability to influence the city council and first get this issue even considered and then finally win this first victory? We'll talk about what's happened since later on in the panel, but how did you build that consciousness and that organization? And because we're on Zoom, you have to talk right into the microphone.
Okay, well, first, thank you, Rick, for holding this. This is a really important question that you raise and an important subject. So it wasn't lonely. I mean, I was surrounded by other people who were really interested in this topic. My colleagues in the League of Women Voters were very interested in electric power and greenhouse gas emissions and what we could do at the local level. So there was that. And then what we started doing was reaching out to create a coalition. Pasadena 100 is not an organization. It's a coalition of nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations. So that was some work, but that was kind of a good approach, and I'm so glad we did that. That wasn't actually my idea. That was Martha Zavala's idea from the League of Women Voters. And then I think another way that we were successful was that we defined our goal. And this was back in 2022, and we've stuck to it. It was a hard goal. You know, it really is it was quite ambitious when we thought of it. I remember Martha said, when we told her this is the topic that we wanted to address, she said, "Oh, that's a heavy lift." At that time, you know, we were producing electricity, we meaning our city, a lot of it, about 46%, of the electricity was being generated by burning coal. That's all stopped now, but that was pretty amazing. So we defined the goal. It was a worthy goal. It was an ambitious goal. And we've stuck with it. So I think that sort of the combination of the coalition and a clear goal. And then we just did a lot of knocking on doors. We had a team of people, several of whom are here tonight, actually, a team of people who were really devoted. And that word devoted, I thought about that devotion. They really, and still, people still are devoted to this goal. So they went knocking on doors. We had a postcard campaign. We got 1,600 postcards signed. So that's kind of how we got formed. And it's
And then the
continued.
other dimension that you brought was a lot of people feel emotionally about climate change.
Yeah.
There's fear, there's frustration and even anger about the fact that the last 4 years have each broken the record for the hottest year on record. And so people want change, but the other dimension that Pasadena 100 brought was a lot of rigorous focus on facts, sometimes
Yeah.
calling into question the city staff's version of
Sometimes.
sometimes, and and actually bringing expertise and a deep reservoir of both experts from Caltech and JPL and other walks of life, but also people who were self-taught, who really dove into understanding municipal finance, utility policy, state laws. How did that combination of grassroots activism and collecting signatures and collecting postcards mesh with becoming a really sophisticated source of knowledge and analysis?
Well, it helped having some really smart people who were in the original group. Pasadena is an amazing place. We have amazing resources. It wasn't only scientists, we have artists and teachers, people who know how to explain things. We also decided early on that we couldn't be afraid of the topic of electric power. People get intimidated by it and they think, oh, no, I don't know. What is a megawatt? What is, there's a whole bunch of technology and terms. We actually in the league wrote a book called Power Talk, a booklet. And part of that was going through a process of saying we can learn these things. And if we don't, we won't be able to talk about them. So, yeah, that process of self-education and then just being fortunate to have really good, smart people on the team.
So Anna, you have pioneered three different avenues for making a difference, and you're one of the youngest commissioners in our city, and you've already forged quite an impact. You've done it that I know of through activity on social media, which is not unusual for your generation, but is not necessarily something that was a very common in Pasadena. You volunteered for a number of organizations, for your church, for Pasadena 100, for Pasadena Heritage and Plant-Based Treaty and on. And then you also serve now on a city commission. How have those different avenues taught, what have those different avenues taught you about how to make an impact, a positive impact in a community like Pasadena?
Well, thank you. Oh, can you hear me? Probably better here. Um, I think just service. When I came to Pasadena, I didn't know anyone or anything. It was all from advice that I would love the city because of Caltech, the Rose Bowl, Northern Simon. And when I came in and going into real estate, I wanted to learn about the city. So I think by volunteering in all these places, I was able to get a better story, understanding of Pasadena, like how they care, the soul of the city, if you will. And from that point of view, then understanding how to communicate with each organization and trying to bring all organizations back to the center, which is we wouldn't have anything without the soil, the trees, and everything that is nature. So I think all these places kept bringing me to the center of it. And it's just communicating to all of them how they care about the same thing, but in the language that each organization speaks, if that makes sense.
Sure. LP, you have a distinct role on this panel and in your work. Elected officials can set ambitious goals. City commissioners can advise about how to achieve them. Community activists and advocates and experts and citizens can advocate for what they would like to see. Then it falls to staff like you to actually find the time, the money, and the means to translate all of that activism and often idealism into practical reality. So what your experience in New York, Palm Springs, and now 5 months in Pasadena, what has that taught you about the relationship between our professional staff and our community?
Sure. Thank you for the question, council member, and for the invitation to be on this very esteemed panel with people who I've been learning from a lot in those past 5 months. So I think everyone who takes on a role like the role of the sustainability administrator in Pasadena has a different approach to how they would do it. Because the role, basically my job is to be the sustainability glue across the city. But that could mean a lot of different things. Some people might take a very advocacy activist approach to it. My learning throughout my career in other cities so far has really been in understanding the mechanics of government. So how do we finance projects in government? What are the kinds of rules that govern how a public works project might be put into place versus a utility project? How do decisions get made within different kinds of bodies? And so really how I view my role is to understand how those mechanisms work in Pasadena, how they've worked in other cities, large and small, either across the state or across the country. And what are some of those best practices and frameworks that we can put in place in order to make more consistent environmentally positive decisions? Because I feel like when we have clear principles and clear frameworks, it allows us to work more effectively among elected officials, community, government, et cetera, because we are able to take all of those different pieces of input and mesh them with how government work actually gets done. So that's everything from understanding what kinds of things we can put in contract language. What are the ways that we can use RFPs or bids or purchasing to move some of those goals forward versus the role of something like a carbon-free goal. Like how does that get translated into things like a capital improvement plan? Just so my job is to kind of be that dictionary translator between the goals and the targets and what we do on a day-to-day basis.
We are about to begin a climate action plan update. Many cities have adopted climate action plans. I personally have analyzed some of them and find them to be, as we've discussed, largely expressions of good intentions without the kind of rigor and ability to measure progress that can lead to the results that you're focused on. So as you begin this as the leader, project leader for the city of revising our climate action plan, what's the approach you're going to be taking?
Sure. So I'm going to try something a little different, I think. And so one of the things that I think a lot about when I think about the phrase climate action plan is the word action in it. Because often when I've worked on climate action plans or reviewed them, as you've mentioned, climate action plans are a really good snapshot in time of a list of all of the things related to the environment that a city can think of that it's currently doing. And that's great. It's great to have a snapshot of what it meant to be environmentally positive in this city in 2018 or 2021 or whatever. But rarely do those plans change the underpinning machinery to align it with transformative action. So, for example, if you look at the verbs used, even in a climate action plan, you're not likely, we were discussing this earlier today, and you and I are kind of on the same wavelength on this. You're unlikely to see verbs like build or change or start. Like you'll see words like continue, develop, partner. All of these things are great. We have to do all of those things. To me, those things are a given. We should be focusing on our climate action plan on the changes that we need to make, whether those are functional changes or project changes in order to actually reach our ambitious and achievable goals.
Let's start for a moment at the roots. Today, I participated in an unusual project. Last October 1st, I was at EF Academy and St. Mark's School. St. Mark's was destroyed by the Eaton fire and relocated to the campus of EF Academy, which is in my district on where Wesley dead ends just north of Washington. And we were expecting Dr. Jane Goodall to come to the campus and address the students. And we were all ready there to welcome Dr. Goodall. And she was 20 minutes late when we got the word that she had passed on that morning. And it was a stark moment of thinking about how precious life is and how much impact a single life can make. And so today, because the whole idea, Dr. Goodall was coming for the launch of something called TREAMS, a combination of tree and dreams. And the idea is to plant trees as part of the recovery from the fires in Pacific Palisades and in Altadena, Pasadena. And so today, EF Academy launched a native tree nursery because there are a number of lots and locations in Altadena that are not yet ready for a tree, but we should be growing trees. So we transplanted trees from little pots into bigger pots so that 6 months from now, a year from now, they can be planted at the new campus for St. Mark's, which will be under construction soon, and in other locations in parks and community areas of Altadena. So let's start at the root. Let's start with trees, which you mentioned, Anna. Trees are remarkable contributors. They exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen, so they sequester carbon. They are home to habitat for birds and insects and animals. They provide shade, which actually a street with a canopy of street trees, which so many Pasadena streets have and so many Pasadena streets don't have, that can reduce the temperature in that street by 10 degrees and therefore mean lower electric bills, less energy consumption. And so trees are one of the most valuable resources that a city can invest in. I know that's something that you care deeply about, Anna, and I'm interested in the panel's view about sort of, can we just start by, as I did 56 years ago, planting trees? And is that just a symbol, or does that actually lead to greater synergy? What's your thoughts?
On planting trees.
In planting trees.
Well, of course we have to plant. I don't know if it's on. Of course we have to plant trees. That's where everything comes from. There was an interesting discussion I went to. It was lessons from Vienna to LA. And they're very thoughtful on the way they do planting and zoning, to the point that even the trees, depending on the fruit, depending on if it's a female or a male tree, they're planted in a way that it actually serves the community. So I wish we were more thoughtful in that manner, just like with community gardens, just a concept again of, then we go into a circular economy and how we never talk about natural capital, which is what it comes down to as well with trees. They're a natural capital.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts, LP?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts about trees, but I will say most of my thoughts on trees are informed by my work in the city of Palm Springs, which is a place that doesn't have that many trees. But trees are very important, even in a city like Palm Springs. You know, we were trying to get that tree city designation that I think Pasadena has probably had since the 80s or something like that. Really long time stalwart. I think, Councilmember, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned about whether it's a symbol or it's an important tool. And I think it's an and not an or, because I think it's so important in our communities both to do work that allows people to tangibly connect to the environment. So planting trees is a great example of like something I can do right now. It's going to provide shade. It's going to contribute to shade equity, you know, based on where we're planting trees, because looking, you know, most cities, you can do some analysis and you can kind of tell where there's trees and where there's not. And we can have a conversation about why that's true, but I think we probably all kind of know why. So there's work that we need to do in order to provide that equity across our city. I also think that for things where, what's the right way to say this? I think that's where dividing and conquering in a place like Pasadena makes a lot of sense. We have so many amazing organizations, communities, et cetera, that can take on some of those projects. We know where the trees should go. We know how to plant a tree. Let's go. So how can we divide and conquer based on the best resources that each group has to say, like, who's the best fit for planting the trees? Is it a group that has a ton of volunteers and they just want to get out? Awesome. How can the city support you to just go to town and get out of its own way? Whereas maybe if an organization might be a little more oriented toward a different kind of problem solving, then we can kind of track them that way and then, you know, put the resources where they're most effective. So I don't know if that really helps, but that's kind of how I think about it.
This is a really good question, and I'm going to weigh in on the side of symbol, I think. But it makes me think of, I grew up in South Central LA and a very treeless kind of block. It was nice enough, but not green at all. And then when I was about 11 years old, some friend of mine invited me to a summer camp in Idlewild. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, the trees were so beautiful. And I fell in love with trees. And I do love trees, but I think it's part of a broader picture, loving nature. And I think about the artificial turf struggle right now in Pasadena. You know, we need to live in a society in which people love trees and love grass. And not everyone has that feeling. That said, a word that you use, synergy, I think is really important. If we love trees, we also have to realize that if climate change progresses as it is, in fact, progressing, those trees won't live. I mean, we have to have a sense of urgency. So if we just think about planting trees and we don't connect it with all of the other things, like why are we going to have a hydrogen bus station? Why are we still burning gas? Why are we proposing artificial turf? It's not enough. I think it has to be unified into a synergistic vision of loving nature. So I love trees, but I have to love the whole thing.
Well said. One of my first victories as a new council member was we had left out $200,000 in the budget to plant trees last year. So to correct that mistake, a report came to the city council to allocate $200,000 out of our $1.5 billion budget. So $200,000 is a lot of money, but it's a very small drop in the bucket compared to the larger budget of our city. And I said, well, why don't we increase it by 50% to 300,000? And I was a member of the finance committee, so I was one of 4, and all I needed was 2 more. So we won at the finance committee, and then since the finance committee recommended it, it passed without any opposition at the. So we're actually planting 50% more trees this year as a result of that tiny little victory. I want to shift because we have our first question. And I think it's an important one. I'm not sure that we have the expertise on the panel to address it, but I have some thoughts. To what degree has the city and the school district completed performance contracting on public buildings, since energy efficiency should be the first step toward responsible climate policy? Does anybody want to weigh in on that?
I don't know if
LP?
I can speak to performance contracting. What I can speak to is um, the ways that I've seen municipal building policy really stick and become more efficient. And that is by thinking about energy efficiency as your first clean energy resource. So making sure, and this is an important conversation when we think about the transition to carbon-free electricity, right? It's like, the cleanest, kind of to Commissioner Soul River, the greenest building is the one that already exists. The cleanest megawatt is the one you don't have to buy. So when I think about the value of using all of the tools that we have, and we have a municipal utility, so performance contracting is a little bit funkier than it might be with an IOU. I could spend a really long time talking about this. I started in utilities. You really don't want to hear all that, but I think pushing for maximum efficiency, especially as our climate changes and becomes more extreme, because a lot of our buildings were built for a very, very mild climate, and we are seeing extremes on either side. We're seeing our colder days are getting a little colder, and our hotter days are getting hotter, but most importantly, it's staying hotter at night longer. And so that's where energy efficiency in buildings becomes extra important, because we have to keep that heat out of the buildings. So whenever we're thinking about our municipal buildings, really focusing on efficiency first is really important, especially in the context of looking at municipal solar and storage and things like that. That's all I can really say about it.
I can say that both the school district and the city have done an earlier sort of first pass for what we might describe as the low-hanging fruit, right? Switching out to more efficient light bulbs, switching out some of the outmoded air conditioning and heating, but neither institution has comprehensively done this in recent years, and there have been dramatic improvements. I built an ADU 2.5 years ago. That's where I live. It's going to be on the Bungalow Heaven home tour on Sunday. So if you want to join, but we have no gas, and the heating is 3 heat pumps, which provide both. It basically uses the moisture in the air to heat and cool my little home. And because it was built 2.5 years ago, it had to meet the very stringent modern energy efficiency code. So double paned windows that lock down, etc. So no gas and solar powered. So the big house in the front and my little house in the back, our combined energy or electricity bill last year was $700. That's not $700 a month. That's $700 for the year. And we have an array of batteries as well, which helps enormously. So is this one of the areas, LP, that we should be focusing on?
I think as we look at our climate action plan, figuring out how we maximize an integrated approach to energy efficiency and building electrification is going to be really key.
Our electric utility offers an analysis. If you ask for one, they will assign someone, typically a contractor, who will come out to your home and give you tips, both ones that require very little investment and those that require more ambitious investment into swapping out a more energy efficient refrigerator, for which we give rebates, swapping out your gas stove for an induction stove, for which we give rebates, installing more insulation and better fixing the cracks and the holes around your windows and all of that. And so that's something that's already in place for you. And then I know that in New York, they were a national leader in dealing with larger buildings and helping larger buildings come up to modern energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a fun couple of projects to work on for sure.
We have not yet tackled that in Pasadena. All right, let's talk about
Something about efficiency,
100%.
real quick. So it used to be that we relied a lot on efficiency. And it kind of was a way sometimes that people had of saying, well, I'll just reduce my use. But I think one of the things that's really brilliant about the optimized strategic plan, which is our city's plan to make the transition to carbon-free electric power, is that it does have a focus on demand response and on rooftop solar. So the absolute best way of being efficient about electricity is to have rooftop solar, because then you're not drawing electricity from the grid. And by the way, I've got to say, if you don't know, PWP has fantastic incentives right now, and this is new for solar. So I just want to add that this is the ultimate efficiency, is doing what you're doing with your house, having solar and just not drawing electricity from the grid.
And because the sun doesn't shine all day or all night, having the batteries to capture the solar when it's at its peak, and then utilize it when the lights are on. Let's talk about the utilities goal of getting to 100% renewable. There are apprehensions about the cost and the practicality of getting to 100% renewable that continue to recur. And they're real questions, and we have some real answers. Can we start with you, Cynthia? How have you addressed this issue of, are we going to spend a bunch of ratepayer money on a wildly idealistic and unrealistic goal that's going to cost particularly our lowest income residents in the pocketbook?
Oh, boy. Yeah, we've been hearing this for a long time. I served on the Stakeholder Technical Advisory Panel for the Integrated Resource Plan, and then I served on the Technical Advisory Panel for this optimized plan. So I went through back and forth on these issues at great length for, it's been 3.5 years now, I guess. When I hear these things, and I hear them from various people, less now, but still, people have to think critically. They forget something. We have to buy electricity. We are buying electricity. It's not like it's free. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on electricity. We have our own gas plant, which is a money pit. We're constantly having to spend money on the Glenarm plant. I'm not talking about a couple of $100,000. I'm talking about 10 million here, 10 million there. It's expensive. The importation of electricity from developers all over the state and all over actually the Western United States, from Arizona and Utah, this costs a lot of money. So the people who make this critique that, it costs a lot of money, it is an investment to install solar on institutions, on city property, on residential property. It's an investment like anything else. But the beauty part of it is, once you invest, the sun's energy is free. Now, you do need to have batteries and you need to do some other things, but this is the smartest investment we will ever make, especially given what's happening in the world right now, supply chain problems, the stupid wars that we're in that are creating all kinds of problems. You've seen the price of oil and gas. When we have our own supply and when we have invested intelligently in infrastructure, we will be to some extent insulated from that. So this notion that electricity is, all this burning of gas we're doing all over the place and burning of coal, that this is somehow more efficient, is just incorrect. So, yeah.
I want to turn to another controversial topic, which is one that I've been focused on since last August. The state of California requires all local transit agencies to switch to 100% renewable fuel. And several years ago, Pasadena was among a number of local transit fleets. We have the Pasadena transit buses that you see. We made a choice to to go to 100% renewable through hydrogen. Hydrogen was to fuel cell buses that were a promising technology at the time. Since then, instead of getting better, in some ways things have gotten worse when it comes to hydrogen. A lot of hope has been placed that hydrogen would turn out to be a very cheap way of getting to renewable energy. But the laws of physics, as well as the laws of economics, as well as the laws passed in Washington, D.C., have all made it more difficult to pursue hydrogen. For example, the Trump administration has rescinded a $1 billion grant to the state of California, which was to be matched here locally by our tax dollars, to actually create a hydrogen hub to help fuel this market for hydrogen. So we're still on track, however, to spend $15 million on a hydrogen fueling station, to buy $35 million worth of hydrogen buses, which are bigger than the ones we have now, which are often the only time our buses are full is when they're carrying students in the morning and in the evening. They carry passengers all day, but that's the only time they're ever full. So we have to buy more expensive, bigger buses and invest in a $15 million hydrogen station. I've been successful in creating a pause. We were about to spend $316,000 to start designing that $15 million. But I don't want to put you in a difficult spot, LP. But how do you approach the challenge of analyzing and coordinating these investments? Not to ask you to take a position on hydrogen versus electric buses, but how can the city make those intelligent decisions even as things change?
Sure. Well, thanks for that one, council member. So I'll be honest, my training is in engineering. And so my number one thing that I avoid doing is speaking out of turn on things I don't understand deeply. So what I will talk about is that decision-making framework that we would use. And I actually think it's kind of similar to some of the things that you brought up when talking about the questions and concerns raised around the transition to carbon-free electricity. So what I try to do in a situation like this is to understand how the different, like how we can make what I call a least regrets decision. So what are the choices that we can make that provide us the strongest foundation for future growth? So if we are in a situation where the technology path is not determined, so a lot of things in sustainability, there is no clear answer today on whether it's going to be all battery buses or all hydrogen buses or some mix of both or something that hasn't been invented yet. Like we're still in a period of technological change. So making those kind of long-term financial investments does feel risky because we don't know which way it's going to go. So what are the choices that we can make as a city that set us up for the greatest possible number of successful outcomes? And that includes keeping track of where the federal investment is going. That includes keeping track of what other cities are doing. In New York, we always used to call it the second mover advantage. You never want to be first. You always want to be second. Second is way cheaper and way safer because the first person already figured out the tough stuff. But kind of when I think about questions that, you know, either whether they're something like the hydrogen station or even around like, how do we make sure that our ratepayers are not unfairly burdened by costs of making a change? I always think about the phrase like doubts become problems to solve. So instead of letting a lack of information stop us from making a decision, how do we focus in on the key element of the question? So for example, in the case of like rooftop solar, you know, I'm an apartment dweller. I know we have a lot of people in Pasadena who cannot put solar on their own roof. But we do have a lot of people in Pasadena who can. So how can we make it as easy as possible for the people who can to just take care of it so I and my team can focus on the harder problem of how do we solve the multifamily rooftop solar, for example. Same thing for the transit. So it's like, is there some kind of 80-20 solution where maybe we can use one type of choice for X, so we can then reduce the size of the really difficult problem to solve. So that's generally speaking how I have found some of those thorny, hard to solve questions become just try to make the problem a little smaller.
Let me bring in the governance aspect of this, which is we have advisory commissions in the city, which are an avenue for our citizens to have an official voice in the process. And the Environmental Advisory Commission has actually come out against the deployment of hydrogen. Taking a step back from that, Anna, you've been on the commission how long?
A little less than a year.
Okay. So what have you learned about serving on a commission and how to be effective at a commission, and what would make commissions more effective, and how can our residents participate more in the decision-making process?
Um, so that's a loaded question. Okay, so I think the experience of Pasadena Heritage as a board to then being in a commission, I've learned in both instances that you have to first come in and listen. So I think I've been surrounded with really great commissioners who have an expertise in the environment in a way that I don't. I come with a business background. Um, so I think listening to each person and then trying to also understand my side of the equation, which comes from a business perspective, and then kind of similar to what LP was saying, but trying to translate that. So in the Environmental Advisory Commission and me coming from a business background, it's like, okay, so my clients look at the bottom line. And in the Environmental Advisory Commission, we're trying to uplift, support the environment. So how do we give the environment also a line in accounting, meaning the natural capital that it is? So I think by listening to the experts scientifically in the environment side, also listening to Cynthia a lot. Uh, I love listening to Cynthia. Because you're not just passionate, but you also come normally with the numbers. And then you also say, oh, don't worry, it's also financially smart. So I think having the scientific, the business, and all the different equations, I think is what I'm trying to, in a way, do in the Environmental Advisory Commission. How does my business background translate into a way that it can help the environment?
And again, I want to encourage the goal of these things is to give you the information to then act and to take a role in our democracy is not to just be a spectator, because democracy is not like watching a football game or a baseball game or a soccer game and cheering for the red side or the blue side or the team named after this animal or that animal. It's you're a player in this. You get to vote, obviously, but also in between elections, your voice matters because these things affect you. Part of my job when I was knocking on doors during my campaign was explaining to people why local government matters. And I said, you don't even have to go outside your house, right? If you go outside your house, we start at the sidewalk. Our sidewalks suck. We have a lot of broken sidewalks. Then the streets, then the street lights, then the traffic signals, then the police, the libraries, the parks. So all these things affect our daily life, the trees. But you don't have to go outside your house. The lights are publicly provided. The electricity in this room and in your home comes from the sea. When you flush the toilet or turn on the tap to wash the dishes or wash your hands, that's publicly provided. All of these things affect your life. And so you can just accept that it's just the way it is and you can't fight City Hall and, whatever. Obviously, the fact that you're here tonight indicates that you have a higher level of interest and aspiration and expectation but there's 20,000 people that live in District 2, and part of our job is to engage and inform this much larger audience of folks, because look, democracy is not all that healthy in our country today. And I'm not just blaming that on, our president. Democracy has become highly polarized in a way that in other countries and in this country's history has led to really dire circumstances. When people stop talking with each other and working with each other and trying to find the common good, at some point they start demonizing each other. That we're already at that stage. And then at a certain point they start jailing each other. And then the next step is they start torturing and killing people. And that may seem a long way away, but that's what a lot of people thought in Greece before the coup, in Spain before the Civil War, in Lebanon before this latest outbreak. So we ought not to take it for granted, especially on we're getting kind of old as a democracy. We're 250 years old, and sometimes things get a little bit creaky. So taking an interest in your government is something that's everybody's job, not just the folks who come out tonight. Any more questions? We'll try to breathe in, and just in a few minutes, we'll open it up to your direct questions and comments. But I want to ask a broader question. What's your vision of a green city over the next 5 to 10 years for Pasadena? What is the unifying theme that we should be taking as a vision for where we want to go to be more sustainable? And the United Nations says sustainable is not just an environmental issue, it's an economic and a social issue. Without the economics, we can't be sustainable. Without the social ability of our people to work together, we can't be sustainable. And without the natural environment that supports us, the air, the water, the surroundings of our ecosystem that grow our food, etc. So what's your vision? Can we start with you, Cynthia? What's your vision for
So 3 things.
Pasadena?
Yeah, 3 things. One is, let's say 5 years from now, my vision is that we have really focused on the single most important thing we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is to change our way of producing electricity. That is the most important and feasible thing that we can do. And we can be an example for California, for the nation, and for the world. And I'd love to see that. Second thing is, I'd love to see us in a better state of alignment. We have city officials like Rick, who are absolutely amazing, who really, and he didn't pay me to say this, but if you haven't seen Rick in action in a council meeting or seen some of the things he writes, like his memo on hydrogen, where he just, takes it down. It's very specific, very analytical, very persuasive. I'd love to see the city more like that, where we have, some of us can relate. We haven't really had good city management, in my humble opinion. And I'm sure LP is going to change all that single-handedly. But no, I mean, we need alignment between our policies and what the staff does, which doesn't happen a lot. And then the third thing I'd love to see as a vision is innovation strategy in this city. We are going to be doing some amazing things with electric power, and I'd love to see us using that as a way to drive innovation, economic development. I spent a lot of my career actually working on innovation strategy with developing countries, but we can do that here. We can work with Caltech. We can work with JPL, PCC. We have a lot of resources here. This all leads to a rich economic environment. We're not really doing that right now. We could be like a battery expertise, a solar expertise center. And so we can do this. That's my vision, that we actually will do that.
Anna, your vision.
My vision, I think it involves just lowering carbon print, and that involves everything from food. I want to thank Plant-Based Treaty for being here. Um, and I want to give a shout out to Samantha because she's been at Climate Week and every event. I don't know how she's done it. Also, obviously, I Declare, they opened up right before the fires. They're all plant-based. Chef Rami, is a local business that cares for the people, that is about the people, about the planet. They were even coming up with new cups that are edible. So I think that the whole concept of a circular economy, of um, natural resources all of a sudden having also a number. Maybe we have to put a price tag, then we do, but what does it do to the environment? And I think that has been adaptive reuse has only been part of the equation, is really the idea of reusing everything, clothes, sofas, materials. Again, I think part of it is also changing the culture because it really comes down to that. I heard one time former city manager Marcus talking, and he was saying that culture is very important. And if that's something that I learned that every organization is that before you advocate, you have to educate. And I try to educate myself constantly with people like Cynthia from Pasadena 100. And with her, I've had conversations even about plant-based food as well. And the idea that everything comes together from the buildings that we reuse, the solar energy, the clean energy that we choose. Um, so I think to me, a sustainable green city is one that, going back to what Cynthia said, we're not depending on other countries per se for our resources. We're able to create our resources and reutilize them. So I think to me, a sustainable city is one where we're preserving trees, where we have clean energy, where we're reusing buildings, and the idea of a 15-minute city that you so eloquently wrote about 3 years ago with the other 10 ideas for Pasadena. Um, and the idea that when there's walkability, then you can use cars less, and that requires mixed use, and adaptive reuse lends itself for that. And part of that idea or vision to me also involves the arroyo. And this is gonna sound a little more like an utopian, and this is where LP is gonna have to help us figure out how to get there. But we love to see the arroyo flow again, you know? Um,
And even have trout.
yeah, so I think with my humble opinion is just one where nature, we're not working against nature, but with nature, and where the circular economy again lends itself for doing that because now we've allocated capital to natural resources. So again, it's changing the culture because otherwise we're gonna be keep fighting the system in a way that is not productive for the environment.
LP, I recognize that after 5 months on the job, this may be challenging for you to sketch out, but you also bring tremendous professional expertise and experience. So what are your thoughts for your now fellow Pasadenans?
Sure. So I'll say that this is a little bit me speaking as me, an individual person, but it's also the perspective I bring to the work. So it's not like this is not the climate mission statement of the city of Pasadena, but it is what motivates me to do my work. So I've really come to see climate justice as this idea that it can be a transformative lens through which we live better in our environment and in community. And so what I mean by that is, how do we think about all of those sort of like difficult vectors that we deal with in our day-to-day lives? So it's like, how do we age in place better? How do we raise families better in a city like Pasadena? How do we expand opportunities to build wealth, to feel secure, to feel safe in community? And I think so much of the work that we do in climate, like so many of the things that have come up on the panel tonight, whether that's better, cleaner access to electricity or healthy access to outdoor space, I think of all of that as part of this transformative climate justice vision. So there are so many like small things that you can do within that. One of the things that's kind of like been nagging at me for a couple of years is how we improve the quality of homes. So particularly when we think about where lower income residents might be living, residents on a fixed income, people aren't necessarily always living in high quality, healthy buildings, but the work in order to make those buildings higher quality and healthier is the same work you do to make a building more energy efficient. So for example, if we think about improving air quality in homes, that's improving insulation, triple pane windows. I live in like a single pane window apartment. Like we got some work to do.
Replacing a gas stove with an
Replacing a
induction.
gas stove. And then, access to things like solar to provide that more predictable energy bill that's lower so that you're not spending over 30% of your income or your take home pay on electricity, which would lead you to be considered an energy burdened home. So I think if I were to say what's a near term opportunity that's accessible in the next 5 years across California, it's looking at how we dually address our housing quality challenges, housing affordability challenges, I guess triply address, and our climate challenges in homes. So that's like a near-term thing that is like a bee in my bonnet, but otherwise just kind of looking at how we use this work to improve our relationship to our environment to also improve how we live.
I'm going to share a little bit of my approach, and then we're going to open it up to your questions and comments, and then we'll ask the panel for final thoughts, and then hopefully we'll enjoy each other's company for a few more minutes because it's early for our normal issue forums. The word I think about is abundance. When I was younger and the environmental movement was getting started in America, there was a resistance and a recoiling from the waste and pollution that seemed to be overwhelming our planet. And so environmentalists sometimes got the reputation of, if you follow them, you'll live in a cave and shiver in the dark. And the word I want to use is abundance, because there's nothing more abundant than nature. An acorn grows into a 40-foot magnificent oak tree. It's a miracle. From my favorite flower is the marigold. These little tiny seeds grow into this fabulous, colorful array that, as the Old Testament says, not even Solomon, could match that beauty. So nature is abundant, and we can live better, longer, healthier, more sustainably, more responsibly, more justly, less selfishly, and not only have better lives for ourselves, but be able to share that abundance if we didn't waste it. We've had tremendous growth in our economy and our population. When I was born in 1953, the population of the world was 3.2 billion people. It's now approximately 8 billion. It's extraordinary for me that in my lifetime, my mom is still with us, in my lifetime, the planet has added almost 5 billion people. And all of that growth and prosperity is because for the last 200 years, we've been burning the plants that were around during the dinosaur times. And we may or may not run out of them. I don't know. But the more we burn, the more we're heating the planet. So it's not sustainable. So how do we support a population of 8 billion people, soon to be 9? How do we support people at peace? How do we support them having a place to live and enough to eat? And how do we continue to enjoy, as Americans, this extraordinary ability to live to 94 like my mom and still feel like it's worth living? and that the future will be better than the past. That framework of abundance. This is um, the plant-based foods are delicious. The solar energy is unlimited. There are ways in which we're not talking about making do and shivering in the dark and living in caves. We're talking about living a rich life, not primarily materially, but spiritually, and ways of feeling like we're not exploiting the planet and other people, but we're able to share the benefits. And I think Pasadena can be a beacon for that. That's my hope. So we're going to turn now to your comments and questions. Okay, Pam, we're going to ask you to be so again, comment or question, but just brief.
Speaking for myself, I'm one of the people in Pasadena who lost the home. And I'm thinking, does the city have a specific plan that someone could come and help me look at my house, which is nothing but sticks now, and say, here's what you could do to help us and help you and the planet?
We do have a home energy audit that gives you tips and realistic help about how to conserve water, conserve energy, invest in things like heat pumps and induction stoves, and landscaping, etc. A more holistic approach is not yet one we can offer, but on water and energy, our utility does offer that, and we can connect you to that. Over here.
I'll admit I should have listened or read your climate action plan before asking this question, but in your climate action plan, they tend to be really technical. Is there a section, or can there be a section that really addresses what, like, the 10 things that homeowners can do at home? Because one of the things that's happening today, we're having these amazing discussions about the homeowner things, but I think in order to really get adoption, we need to really educate and bring it down to its basic levels. And I think that's just super critical. I'm hearing bits and pieces of it all night, but really we need to educate people, which is why this forum is so amazing. So I know I used to live in La Cañada, and they made a really good point in their climate action plan that they just put in to really make a whole section on something really bite-sized.
LP, I'm going to turn to you. You've read our current one, and you're in the process of revising our next one. So I think we can make a commitment to honor that suggestion.
I would say so. So short answer to the question is sure, sounds great, makes a lot of sense. Happy to do it. The longer answer is that we don't currently have something like that in our CAP. Our CAP is pretty old. It's a great snapshot of about 10 years ago. And so I think the opportunities and needs have changed. As we're kicking off this climate action planning process, we're having a lot of conversations about who should this CAP be for and what should it say. And so I think there's both a lot of hunger in the community for that, like, tangible action that you can take now. And there's also hunger for making sure that our plan includes things that are transformative and achievable. So that's kind of a nice mix of both. So
Suzanne, we're going to go to you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. And you asked about engaging the community, and being on the Environmental Advisory Commission, along with two other people, by the way, Felix Braden and Aisha Seiler, that just walked out, are here. And we've talked about, in terms of revising the climate action plan, and I love what you said about environmental justice. It makes so much sense. But to see everything through the lens of climate and our planet, and that applies not only to us as a commission, but to everybody here that want to make a difference. And by the way, we have 3 seats opening up on the Environmental Advisory Commission. So if any of you are interested, we meet the first Tuesday night. Everybody's welcome to come. You can see the agenda posted the Thursday before online, and it's really exciting place to be and learn about some things that you can do.
Second Tuesday, we're
Second Tuesday, sorry about that.
Sure. Thank you. I'm concerned about fire and about keeping fire stations online in case of a grid shutdown, a shutdown of the Pasadena grid. I'm wondering if microgrids have been considered to provide a source of clean, efficient energy as opposed to dirty diesel backup in case of emergency. I really am worried about fire stations staying online.
Cynthia, I know that you focused on this.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I know Carlos, who's vice president of the West Pasadena Residents Association, incoming president. So I know this is a preoccupation with our neighborhood. Microgrids are a brilliant idea. We need to do it. It's you can have neighborhood microgrids. You can have microgrids of fire stations, which is what you're talking about. All based on solar batteries. You can have batteries at the microgrid nodes. A lot of cities, I know Claudia back there just came back from Germany. She's looking at all of the work that they're doing in Freiburg. There's a lot of work being done on this kind of thing all over the world, and I think we should implement it. It's briefly mentioned in the optimized strategic plan, but we need to push ahead and actually do it.
Okay.
Right over here.
Good.
Hi. I own a small craftsman. Sorry. I own a small craftsman home. And it has single pane windows. And I was very excited to hear about solar, and I had it evaluated, and the all-in cost for me to convert to solar would be about $45,000. That would be, replacing the gas dryer and, the stove and all of that. And a heat pump is very expensive add-on. And shortly thereafter, I had the opportunity to be on top of a parking garage in downtown Pasadena, and I looked out and I saw acres and acres and acres and acres of flat rooftops with no trees in the way. And I thought, well, if you can get the businesses to do that, then maybe the cost over time will come down for residential use. So that was my observation.
We
Right now,
absolutely,
it's not
we absolutely,
practical.
no, we absolutely agree that businesses are a big part. We currently have a number of businesses that have invested in solar, and while they're a relatively small number, they actually are the majority of the solar power that's generated in the city. It's not residential.
Thank you. We have a new city manager coming on board soon. And I noticed that when the EAC spent 2 years putting together the climate action plan, there was an annual report done twice, 2018, 2019, and then it fell off the radar. I don't know how it can be done, but the new city manager needs to implement the policies that the commissions, the committees, the council approves, and then not let it drop off the radar.
I agree.
You have a question right over here.
My name is Marcus Renner, and there was talk earlier about education, and I just wanted to note that 20 years ago, it was put into the Arroyo Seco Master Plan for Hahamungna that there would be an environmental education center up on the annex property. And that has finally, the city is finally moving forward with help from Councilmember Cole on that plan. And there's a very exciting coalition, dynamic coalition started by Outward Bound Adventures, which is a pioneering environmental justice organization that was started by an interracial group back in the 60s right here in Pasadena on the edge of the Arroyo. And they're pioneering this coalition to bring that environmental education center into fruition, which will provide an anchor for the kind of education that is really necessary for long-term change on all of these issues. So if that proposal is accepted and approved by the city, they will need a lot of support. And so I just want to put that on people's radar that it's called the CREEK Coalition, the Climate Resilience Environmental Education Center. And that is coming, and I think it could
That's
be
right above Devil's Gate Dam in the Hahamungna area, and beautiful oak trees there. Was once part of the Forest Service, I believe. Fire stations?
Yeah, Forest Service district office. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to put that on your radar, it's coming and it's a big piece of this puzzle.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jamie Scott, and I wanted to mention something that's coming down the pipeline that could be almost transformative, I think, for Pasadena. And I'm kind of wondering if there's any planning going around that But the state of California has mandated that electric vehicles coming out in the next few years must have vehicle to grid capability. And that requires that the grid be changed to some degree to allow it. But for instance, we have a battery on our house, and it's the biggest battery you can get. It's only 13.5 kilowatt hours. Our car, which is the cheapest Tesla out there, we got like 6 years ago, is 58 kilowatt hours and capacity. And what that means is just like what we were talking about the buses. If you charge it up during the day for basically for free solar, at night you can run your house, put huge amounts of electricity into the grid. And it seems to me that in the future, the electric cars, if we push for them, even the city could have rebates for electric cars if they promise to give some of their electricity back to the city. It's just something to think about. But I'm wondering, Lindsay, LP, if what is the plan there? It'd be wonderful if they're already planning it, because this, it's all starting to change next year.
Right. So again, I'm gonna put on my engineer hat and be like, I'm not the person running this. What I do know is that utilities and private sector companies and cities across the state have been working for a couple of years to do pilots and programs to test this out. So for example, the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator here in LA has convened their transportation electrification partnership. They've been working on vehicle to grid pilots for a couple of years. I don't want to speak out of turn. There may be one that I just haven't worked on yet. But it's kind of, there are some questions about where the right place is to plug some of those things in. Grid doesn't like to go two directions. So we have to do research on things like how do transformers behave and where's this electricity best fed in. So there's like some technical questions to work out. There was a really great pilot in Oakland with I don't know why I'm blanking on the name of their utility up there, but they got a lot of great data out of that pilot that a lot of utilities across the state are able to use. So the nice thing is it doesn't necessarily have to be a pilot in Pasadena to generate the power system research that we know we need. It would be great to consider, continue to see that. And I'm sure V2G is going to be something that we'll look at. Yes.
Two more.
Hi, my name is Paul. I live here and work in Pasadena. Great point about renters and access to solar. It's something that becomes elusive for renters and also for those with limited income. Senate Bill 868 that's currently in the works is the Plug and Play Solar Act. In a nutshell, it allows you to deploy up to 1,200 watt solar solutions that you can set up yourself, easily deploy, take it with you when you move. And the costs of these are hundreds of dollars to get started, not thousands, not tens of thousands. So my question for the panel is, what are your thoughts on this? What's the city's thoughts on this? And how can we, influence our senators to get a vote on this, because it's currently pending, to get it signed into law?
So I can speak very briefly and then hand it over to the panelists who I think probably will have a lot to say on this. I like the balcony solar idea that you see really commonly in Germany, where you get a solar panel, it's like yay big and you hang it outside and it's awesome. I cannot wait to do it. And I cannot say whether or not I have tried it at my house. Don't ask me any questions. What I will say is anytime we see an opportunity to take a position on a piece of legislation, the way to do that is to work with your Environmental Advisory Commission. So that would be an opportunity to come and make public comment. The commission would then usually write a letter and propose to the council that we take a position as a city. So if you wanted to advocate that the city of Pasadena send in a letter, influence our elected officials, that would kind of be the pathway by which you would do that.
Well, there's another pathway, which is climate activism. And we actually wrote a letter to Pasadena Water and Power about 3 months ago asking about balcony solar, plug-in solar, and we haven't gotten an answer yet. But we're going to pester. There's really no technical reason. We did have a couple of workshops from Bright Saver and another plug-in battery company. Maybe somebody remembers the name of it. Anyway, it's technically doable, and it's a great. We talked about efficiency. It's a great efficiency tool. It's not. You're not going to make enough electricity to feed it back into the system, but you can reduce your bill. And you can just, you can reduce your bill is what it is. And Utah is I think, already successful in passing legislation that facilitates it. The real issue is Pasadena going to require a formal agreement with the utility company, or is it just going to be something that we can plug in?
Bill makes it so they cannot mandate permitting. They have to have an enrollment form.
But we could have our utility company just decide that. There's no reason why they can't decide that. So it's always a matter of, in Pasadena, we have an incredibly active community. So we got to keep that up. Just keep pushing, raise the issue.
Last comment, and two more then. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Igor. I guess my question mostly for LP. Mr. Cole, you started the talk and you mentioned how Pasadena is kind of, ahead of 97% of cities in California, which is great, but it's also gives a kind of unique opportunity where, nobody's going to think about us in 10 years from now and think about, I wonder what number 3 did. We should aim for number 1. I think that's very important because it might be very hard to get to number 1 position, but then cities, countries, counties around the world are going to look at us and say, hey, I want to copy this because we already have all the ingredients. We have Rose Bowl, we have the number of museums we have Metro, and making this a walkable, sustainable city would just be the final check mark, the cherry on top. And my question, I guess, for LP is, I don't know if that's particularly your responsibility, but one of the things when I started looking into solar, I've heard from a lot of solar contractors, they said that Pasadena Water and Power is notorious for once everything is built and ready, it takes them months to turn on your solar, which is like you have all the equipment and it's sitting and it's just nothing is happening. So I wonder if maybe the cost for the permits can be brought down a little bit, or maybe at least force Water and Power to do the final step, the final check mark.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think actually Cynthia is probably best positioned to answer some of that due to a lot of advocacy that she's and Pasadena 100 have done on that specific issue. So what I will say is that permit timelines and permit fees are a good example of a tool that we have control over in a city to influence, to change an outcome. We have permit fees for reasons, like it costs money to do inspections. It costs, that's kind of how financing works in governments in California. That's how we pay for certain things. However, we can make choices to move some of those things around or reduce them or whatever to meet our policy goals. So I think to the extent that through our climate action planning process, we identify, hey, we need to get out of our own way in order to facilitate, 50% more, I'm making something up, 50% more installations of something. Or I know there's state legislation as well that requires instant permitting for certain sizes and scale of solar. There's a lot of ramifications to that, but so those are choices that we can definitely make if that rises to the top of, as the most important or top 10 things that we can do. When I think about how we become that number one city, I'm thinking about how we make system change to make those decisions more obvious and less painful. So as opposed to being the city that has like the best list of the 50 things we're going to do, and because we have a lot of those in place already. We have the carbon-free commitment. We have a number of different things that agencies have done or departments have done for many years. I know we have a lot of our stormwater team here who's very progressive on getting a lot of funding for doing great projects. And we've got a lot of success, but the new thing that we can do is figure out how to best align government to make those obvious environmental decisions. So permitting would be a great example of that. Like, what can we do to make it as easy as possible?
I agree completely with what I just have to point out that the 2018 Climate Action Plan, which is the most recent one we have, one of the specific things that is listed is fixing the broken permitting problem with solar permitting. And we're still messing with it. But, and there's a long story behind this. I mean, you can actually get free permitting software from the state of California. And for some reason, we decided we needed to do our own in Pasadena, and then it didn't work. And a lot of people have had a lot of problems. But the good news is PWP actually announced, and I think Rick had something to do with this. He has a lot to do with a lot of things like this, but they are waiving permit fees for the PWP part of the permit. You still have the second part, which is buildings and fire inspection and that sort of thing. And Rick actually suggested in a public council meeting that they should waive that one too. And maybe somebody's thinking about it.
One last question, then we'll do final comments, and then an opportunity for us to just chat together for the rest of our time together.
This is more a comment than it is really a question. But Anna said, you know, there has to be a whole larger culture change. And I would hope that now that we have a new city manager and we have our sustainability officer, that we would see a real change in the culture of Pasadena government and city staff, that it wouldn't be kind of, as you're saying, you go to your environmental advisory commission and you're working the bureaucracy, that really the departments of the city would be coming to the people to get the vision. It wouldn't be about the department's vision. It wouldn't be about a politician's vision. It would be about what the people have for a vision. There are a lot of smart people here. There are a lot of people who will come up with creative ideas, and there should be a whole new structure of informing the staff and the government as to how we're going to handle climate change.
Okay. All right, Anna, can we start with you? Any final thoughts based upon what we have said, or maybe things that we've missed tonight?
Yes. Based on the last comment, I just wanted to read something from my most recent newsletter. What we can change. What we incentivize, we get more of. So it goes back to that cultural idea. And I think also our departments hopefully working together for the shared vision. And I think at this moment in time, it's also very important for everyone to get involved. No one per se has to be an expert, but there's so many experts in Pasadena. We have Caltech, we have PCC. So I think, again, is going back to what we can change, and what we incentivize, we get more of. So if the goal is to be a sustainable city, we have to create a culture around it that works for it, and that involves natural capital. And I think hopefully that's something that we come out of tonight with, natural capital. And that means this building in itself is capital because of all the trees and resources that were used to create it. So I think learning to appreciate what we have and going away from a throwaway culture that we've had for so long is part of that climate action plan. And obviously having actionable milestones. I think that's something that I really admire from Pasadena 100. They didn't just help pass resolution 9977. They've made sure that um, the city staff is actually running with that plan in order to get there. I think power without accountability doesn't do much, but it's also not fair to put power somewhere else. So I think we all have to get involved. We all have to start counting what really matters and hopefully create that circular economy. Um, so yeah, I think those are my thoughts.
Cynthia?
The only thing I would add to all of these good comments is how important you are. Well, maybe this is the same thing other people have been saying. Pasadena is a really active city, and it's wonderful to see so many people who get involved in climate and environmental issues. The city budget, the capital improvement budget, is being discussed right now. And the expression, well, there's the expression follow the money, but there's the kind of more elevated statement, the budget is a moral document. There was Dr. King's statement. If we want climate action, we need you guys to come out and tell the city council that that's what you want. That's what you want them to spend their money on. And it is the crunch right now. May 4th is an important city council meeting. Diane Morgan over there, she spoke at the council meeting. It was so wonderful to see her. She was a new face. They need to hear from new faces. They need to hear from Pasadena residents that this is important. So that's all up to you. You don't have to be an expert. You just need to say, that this is important to you.
Oh, and if I can add something earlier when LP was talking about solar and balcony, I did see a post from Pasadena 100 on their Instagram about like they're always coming up with great posts on solar.
It's you.
Well, no, that's Pasadena 100. But
We have a mutual admiration society, obviously.
So just a couple of quick little final thoughts. So there's an amazing book that was published about 5 years ago called All We Can Save. And one of the things that I find really powerful about that framing is this idea of what happens if we get it right. So kind of to, I think, some of the points that folks have mentioned earlier in the panel, some of the history of how people have maligned environmental activism in the past is that it's about reducing and being smaller and making difficult choices. But I really try to adopt this idea that, this work is as much about envisioning the future and all of the things that we can get right and all of the things that we can save as it is about making trade-offs. And so to that end, kind of picking up on what Cynthia mentioned, I always like to think both in city government work and then also working with community about all of the ways in which we all access power. So I always tell everybody every job is a climate job. Ideally, my job will not exist someday soon because this work has gone so deeply into every job that anyone could possibly have in the city. Every choice is a climate choice in some way. Every budget decision is a climate decision in some way. So how do we come to an agreement on what those priorities are now and what those choices are that we should make? But all of us, in my community, outside of this, in my neighborhood, in my creative communities, et cetera, we're always making choices that have environmental ramifications. So you have power in a lot of different places, and so what can you do in community to access that power, and how can we work together to transform those systems?
I'm going to applaud that. We have barely touched on a number of topics, making our community more walkable, converting our public and private vehicles to electricity. We've barely touched on the food waste issue. There's a lot of things that we have only touched upon. Being Catholic, I tend to think in threes. And so I want to close with three thoughts. First, one issue that's come up, or one topic that's come up several times, is the city management. Cynthia critiqued our previous city management. Some people have said we have a new city manager and there's great opportunity there. I spent 20 years as a city manager. I bring that perspective and experience. Last night, I was telling my fellow council members in closed session, you know, I never like to talk about being a former city manager. And they said, you talk about it every day. It was a moment of humbling self-awareness. Like everyone else, our new city manager will put his pants on one leg at a time. He's not a miracle worker. He doesn't have a magic wand in his pocket. But we have chosen the next city manager because the council as a whole feels that we need to reinvigorate the culture at City Hall, that we have been extraordinarily successful as a city in many ways because of excellent city management, but we have become more smug and complacent with our success. We have beautiful neighborhoods, we have green trees, we have a lot of programs. This is one of the few cities in Southern California where no child is more than a mile from a library, right? Where, you know, in Salinas, when they ran into economic trouble, the home of Nobel Prize for Literature writer John Steinbeck, they closed their library for several years. So we're privileged to be in Pasadena, but we should not sit on our assets. And so our new city manager is a person whose track record as a submarine captain, as a utility executive, as a city manager of a significantly larger city with a water and power utility, has had a consistent track record of getting things done. So we're looking forward to that new chapter. One of the things that had the biggest impact to me on my whole outlook on local government was when I was mayor, we had the Northridge earthquake. And you all know City Hall. And think about the Euclid side of City Hall. There's that pergola, the arches with a second story bridge. You all know what I'm talking about. So the other three sides, of course, are 3 stories of office buildings. During the earthquake, the only part of City Hall that was damaged was that pergola. That seemed odd. And so Public Works Department actually went down into the basement and retrieved the as-built blueprints for City Hall from 1926 and rolled them out on my desk. And in beautiful 1926 architect handwriting, the pergola was labeled for future expansion. So in 1926, when the population of Pasadena was 40,000, and they built a city hall of 140,000 square feet, they said, well, when this becomes a big city, we're going to need to have bigger city hall. And so this beautiful building was built to actually be expanded. Now, of course, we would never touch it now because it's history. But the reason it was damaged in the earthquake was they didn't put any rebar in it because it was going to be torn down to add a 4th wing of offices. To me, that said, these people in 1926 who built the Rose Bowl, built the Central Library, built the Civic Auditorium, built what is now the Pacific Asia Museum. Imagine a city of 40,000 people that built a stadium that seats 102,000 people. What were they thinking, right? What they were thinking was Pasadena will be a great city. We have to think about the future. We have to think about future generations. And that has inspired me. I have more career behind me than I have ahead of me. But I look to people like Anna and some of the younger people in the audience today, and I think our job is to build a bridge for you to a brighter future. And the last thing is I've actually seen this in action. We talked about Pasadena 100 and their success, but McDonald Park is a block from my home, and an oak tree was overwatered there accidentally, but the Parks Department watered it. The tree began to lean. And so someone said, city, you need to deal with this tree. It's leaning. So the city came out and said, oh, it's leaning. Let's cut it down. And this beautiful oak tree that's been there a long time survived subsequently the 100-mile windstorm. And Jessica Richard, who lives in our neighborhood, decided that she would save the tree. And now she's on the urban forestry committee. And so she is helping save hundreds of trees, literally, in our city. But if it hadn't been for Jessica, that tree would have been chopped down and fed into the chipper. And it's still there. And again, it survived this 100-mile winds that we had in January of a year ago. And so one person made a difference. She had help from Rose Wieland, who is now a fourth grader. She was a third grader, and she spread the word. She's a Girl Scout. On Sunday, we gave her troop a tour of City Hall, and so she got to sit in the mayor's chair. She was mayor for a minute, and so people like Jessica, people like Rose, give me hope, and that is what fuels all of us, is hope that not only will we not have a worse world, but we can actually together make a better world. So thank you all for coming tonight, and enjoy the rest of our evening together.